In this exercise, I'll be showing you how to attach a cascading style sheet to an HTML web page. We're going to be creating two files for this, one being an HTML page and the second one being a cascading style sheet which ends in .css. Right now I've got the finished product on the screen here that we're going to try to achieve with this exercise, and I'll just quickly explain the different segments here. At the very top you'll put in your full name, and you're going to use an H1 tag for that. I will show you the code shortly, but just remember H1 tag for the top line, which is your full name. Then I'm going to get you to create two separate paragraphs, and I do want you to copy the exact text that I have here. Just as a learning aid, it's relevant to the exercise. So you're going to create two paragraphs here that you can see that are in a red color and at a smaller font size, and that is all actually being dictated by our cascading style sheet. And then after the second paragraph, you're actually going to include a line break here as well, right after the word tag. And then we're going to create a list. It's going to be an unordered list with 4 points. And again, I do want you to copy the text exactly as you see it written here. And inside of these lines from the list, we're actually going to do what's called an inline tag, where we can actually apply a unique style to the what in this case will be a span tag. So a span tag can go in a line, and it just basically isolates whatever's between the tags. And in this case, we've got the 3 relevant words being isolated here. And I will explain some of this shortly as well. Then following that, you're going to create a second heading here. This will be done with an H2 tag. And we will again be decorating the color of that and the fonts and so on with our external cascading style sheet. Then I want you to place an image on the page, and I do want it to be on its own line. I don't want it to be sitting after this text. So you will have to put that image tag inside of a pair of paragraph tags. Now you're going to notice on this image that there's this red border that goes all around. The border is what we're going to create in our cascading style sheet and then apply it to the image. Finally, below there we have one more line of text, which is actually a paragraph once again, and the paragraph allows it to run on its own line. And then at the very end, I'm going to get you to create a hypertext link, just as you see here, and it will link to my lessons page, which is djolessons.com. Okay, so that's the finished product right there. Let me actually hide this right now. I'm just going to go to my desktop and open a folder, and this is how you're going to build. Let me just hide this other stuff for now. Hide others. This is what you're going to build as your directory structure. So you're going to create a root folder. I would recommend just putting it on your desktop. It's a nice safe local place on your C drive. And then inside of there, create 2 subfolders. Now we've done this previously for images. We've created a subfolder. You will need to download the image called 2 dogs and place it inside the images folder. Then you're going to create a second folder, call it CSS. That's where we will ultimately save our CSS file, and we will be linking to it from the HTML file. Let me show you a finished directory structure. Now this has the previous exercise as well in it. But you can see here I've got my CSS style sheet. Inside of the CSS folder, inside of the images folder, I've got the image called 2dogs.jpg, and then alongside those folders in the root folder, I have my HTML file. Now this was the previous lesson. For this one, you will name it your last name underscore 3a.html. And again, if I launch that, that is the file we've been looking at. Okay, so let me just hide this again. So once again, I'll just close that. To start, before you even get your HTML page created, just create a root directory, 2 subfolders in there, one called CSS, one called images, and inside of images, put the downloaded image called 2 dogs inside of the images folder. Ultimately, this root folder is what you're going to compress using the zip file method and upload to Blackboard. So let's get started by creating our HTML page and our CSS documents and placing them where they need to go, and then we can go in and edit them and build on them, if you will. As you can see here again, I have my root folder. I do have it on my desktop, and I've got my two folders already created, my CSS folder and my images folder, with the image of the two dogs placed inside of that folder, and that would have been downloaded from the website. So I'm going to create a HTML file and place it alongside these inside of the root folder. Now I'm using a program called TextEdit. I'm on a Mac here. If you're on a PC, I would suggest Notepad or Notepad++, which is even better, and it's actually better than TextEdit. It's nicely color-coded and so on. But regardless, let me just go in here and start a new file. Or in fact, you know what? I'm going to open the existing finished file, which I have here. And we'll just use that as a reference. Let me just open that up a bit here. And in fact, I'm just going to expand the size so it's a little easier to read for those in the back row, or in this case, sitting at home on your laptops. All right, so there's the finished file. Let me create a new file and do a save immediately and place it where it needs to go. So new. And even before I put any code in, I'm just going to save it. Again, this is about putting it where it has to go. So I'm going to go to my desktop. I have a folder called root, and that's where I want to save it. So I'm going to save it as, and I want you to use the same naming convention, your last name, underscore the lesson number, which is 3A, and very importantly, end it with a .html. In fact, that .html is what makes it a .html file. It's actually that simple, even though we're just working in a text editing piece of software. So I'm going to save that in the root folder. That's what's critical right now, to save that in the root folder and use .html. All right, so I'm going to go to that root folder and just double check that it's there, and there it is. Okay, so let me go back to TextEdit, and we'll just start by building the basic file. Just going to open this up a bit. So it's just I'm going to declare it with the doc type, which is the first line you see up here, which again just declares that this is an HTML5 compliant document. That's what this actual tag means. So we're going to start with that, and exclamation doc type space HTML, close brackets, and again I'm just going to increase the view on this so that you can see it a little better. Okay, so let's just create our basic HTML structure, and then I'll talk about some of the content. So again, we start with the HTML tags to surround everything. So I'm just going to go down a few lines here and put my closing HTML tag. Okay, and then between that we have the two main sections, which are the head and the body. Now the head typically contains programming features, can contain style elements and so on. We're just going to put a title in it today. So we'll start with the head tag, opening, and then I'm going to put it on another line. I'll put the closing tag. It does not need to be on separate lines whatsoever. I just find it easier to read and explain. So there's my head tag. In between the head tags, I'm going to put a page title. So why don't I do that right now? So I'm going to go in here, and it's the title tag, my opening tag, and whatever goes in between this and the closing title tag is what will appear in the tab when we're looking at this file in the browser. So I'm just going to drop in the closing title tag down here, and in between, I just want you to put in your full name. And I'll just say with space lesson 3A. There we go. Now this space here actually does not render out. It's just space in the code view, but it does not actually render out as space on an HTML page. You only get one of those, like one space between words. And we can elaborate on that in another lesson. But let me just save this for now. And we'll create some content now which would go in between the body tags. So that was our head. Now I'm going to create some body tags below there. Here's my opening body tag. And just below here a bit, I'm going to put my closing body tag here. Now what happens, oh, I hit the wrong key there. What happens with the body tag is that everything in between the body tags is typically what is visible on the web page. So I'll start with the, I'll call it the page heading, if you will, and it's just going to be your first name, rather your full name, And we'll start with declaring that in between H1 tags. So I'd like to put in my pair tags first, then the content that goes in between the tags. I just find it's a little safer to work, I guess, and I won't accidentally forget to close the tag off, which can of course create certain issues on the page. So H1, and again, just the full name. Okay, there we go. Now I actually have something I can look at. I'm going to save the file. I'm going to go over to my desktop, and you can just launch the file by double clicking it, and it will just launch your default browser, and you can look at it in there. So I'm going to do that right now, and lo and behold, there we go. I can actually see the pathway up here as well, but there is my name in between the H1 tags. Now, another cool thing you can do when you're in a browser is you can actually look at what's called the source code, which is the HTML code that creates the page. And all browsers do this. Where you access it varies from browser to browser, but in Firefox here, under Tools, Web Developer, I can see page source. And page source just gives me the code that actually is what's sitting behind this page. It's actually a little easier to read here, I find. If I make it larger, even easier, of course. And you can see the exact code I applied in my text document is what's being reflected here. It's color-coded, a little easier to make out maybe here, but nonetheless, there is your code. So to take this feature a little further is if you're seeing something cool on a web page that you like, you can go in and quote, copy and paste that code and borrow it and apply it. Obviously, if there are copyright issues, you need to be aware of them, but you can't copyright HTML code. So if you like a certain set of features, you can copy and paste them into your page and then change some of the particulars after you've pasted it. Having said that, let me just close this now and go back to my documents here under text edit. So you can see here I have the beginning of a file. Now I'm going to go over to my finished file here in reference. I'm not actually going to type all this out for you. It would just waste a lot of time, I think. I'm just going to go to the finished file right now and explain a few more things. If we look up here inside of the head, we have a link. That is a link to what we call an external cascading style sheet. Now, a style sheet, again, can decorate content on a page. It can even dictate layout, locations, sizes, and so on. It's very extensive what you can do with external style sheets. Basically, the HTML is the infrastructure, and the style sheet is the decoration, if you will, the designer's input once the construction is put together. So the way this works is it's a link tag, link, and then we have an attribute called href equals hypertext reference. And what we see in the quote marks is the pathway. So I can see relative to this file, there's a folder called CSS. And inside of that folder called CSS, I know it's inside of a folder because of the slash here. I have a file called mycss.css. Then you need to add these other attributes in order to make it to work. First one is rel equals style sheet inside of quote marks. And then the second one is type equals text/CSS, also inside of quote marks. The properties are always inside of quote marks, or almost always inside of quote marks. And then we finally close that link tag with a bracket, and there is no closing tag for that. And that is how we link to the external style sheet. So having said all that, let's create our external style sheet and place it where it needs to go. I'm going to go File, New, and then File, Save. And it might be Save As in your case, but regardless, I'm going to go to my CSS folder, and I'll name it mycss.css. Click Save, use .css, and there we go. Now it's a blank file. We'll address that shortly. But now I actually have the file that will link. So let me actually create this link here. I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to copy this. Go over to my HTML file and paste that inside of the head. So I'm just going to go one line below the title here and paste that in. Save my file. All right, so I think the best thing to do right now is we'll get to some of this content shortly. But I want to style that H1 tag. I want to give it some features. So I'm going to open my other file again, which is the finished file, and we'll take a look at that file. I'll actually open it from within TextEdit. It may launch another program if I double click on it. So let me go into CSS here and double click that and open it. So I'm just going to expand the view on that as well. Okay, and open that up a bit. So this is my CSS style sheet. Now let me actually show you an image here and explain the syntax that we're using. I've got this nice little graphic here, and it explains the elements on creating a style. So these are basically the 4 elements, and this is what we're going to use today. First, we have what's called the selector. This is the element that will be affected by what is contained within the declaration. The declaration is between the curly braces, as you can see here. Now within that we have literally hundreds and hundreds of attributes and properties and values that we can apply. And in this case I have 3, one for font family, where I declared the font and the backup font if that font doesn't exist, the font size, and the color of the font. And these you can actually access. I'll show you on my web page where you can access all of these properties from a master list on the internet. So you can see here, this is the property. In this case, let's use the color as the example. Color is the property. What color? Well, that's known as the value. The value in this case is black. We will get much more in depth on color and color codes, but you can use some of these common color names. Okay, so again, just to review, we have a selector, which means anytime we encounter this tag, in this case it's the paragraph tag, it will decorate the contents of that paragraph tag with all of these properties and their values contained within the declaration. So let me go back to my Word file. I know that's a lot there. And in my CSS file, let's just isolate the first one. Actually, we'll skip the body right now and let's just talk about the H1. In fact, I might change this for the sake of the example here. I'm going to make it red instead. But you can see here I have my selector H1, then my curly braces, and inside of there I've got my property. In this case it's color, and then we have a colon, and then we have the value after the colon, and the syntax is to end that statement with a semicolon, and that's like the period at the end of a sentence. So I'm going to make the H1 color black, and in my case I'm going to make it red, I think. So let me go, this is the finished file. Let me just toggle over to my blank file, and I'll start by declaring the H1. And again, I'm just going to zoom up on this here. And we'll put in the curly braces. Now I'm going to go below here and put in the closed curly brace. And then in between here, I will put in the property, color, and it's the American spelling, colon. And let me just say red, R-E-D. Close that with semicolon. So when I save this, when we go to our web page, it should now be red. Let me just save that. Okay, and let's go out to the desktop. And let's see here. I think it's in this other folder called root. Sorry, my screen's getting a little messy here. Let me hide everything else. Okay, and this was the finished folder. This is the one we're building on. If I double click this, lo and behold, it has adopted that style. So that right there is the concept. You have an HTML page. Go back to the HTML page. We have various tags. In this case, I only have the one so far, but we have various tags which are potentially subject to being styled with a CSS style sheet. So let me just review here. How do we link to the style sheet? It is part of the head. It goes within the head tags. And it's a link. And that links to the pathway, which finds the file. and then we add these other two properties in order for it to work. Okay, so if I toggle over to the style sheet now that's been linked to, you see the reference, there's my selector, and inside of the curly braces we have the properties and the values that are applied to that particular selector. Now that's known as a tag selector. We're going to create three kinds of styles today. The one is the common tag selector. We're also going to create a class, and we're going to create an ID. Okay, so let me explain the class style, how it works. I'm going to reference my finished CSS file here. I probably should have kept it open. So again, let me just open it from in here. Open recent, there we go. And let me explain a class. This here is what's known as a class, and it's created technically by starting the reference with a dot, a period. Now you can put in any word you want, make up any words you want, or use real words. I called this picture frame. So the way it works is you basically have to apply it in your HTML code. It's like sticking a sticker on a tag, if you will. And this will declare, I'll add it as a property or as an attribute within an opening tag, and it will apply these properties and values to whatever I've stuck this class to. So this one's called picture frame. I wanted to attach that to the image. So I think we'll go in and we'll actually add the image to my file, and then I'll create some CSS to decorate the image. So let me go over to my HTML file here, and I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to go over to here, and you can see my image right here. Just to save time, I think I'll just copy and paste that and explain the code rather than typing it. Okay, so I'm inside of the body tags here, and I'm just going to leave a little room so that it's easy to see what I'm doing. Paste that in. Now let me explain this line of code. It is placing an image on the page. I'm going to hit save right now. But I do want it to be on its own line. That's why I start with a paragraph tag and surround the image with the paragraph tag, as you can see here. So the way it works is it's my image, img, and again the first property that we apply, the first attribute, is the source, what image. And again, it works similarly to the href where it's looking for a pathway. So src equals, inside of quote marks we place the pathway. So I'm saying inside of a folder called images, I've got a file called 2dogs.jpg. That's what I want you to put on screen. The alt code, I'm going to leave this in because it's actually a good practice. What is the alt code? The alt code is basically what appears in place of the image when it hasn't fully downloaded, but probably even more importantly, it's used in websites that are geared for the disabled, for those that can't see, and the text reader would read that out describing an image, calling it 2 dogs. So there's a few reasons why we'd put an alt tag in there. It doesn't have to be there for it to work, but it's certainly a courtesy with respect to the users on the internet. Now I did declare width and height. I would say you can leave that optional. In fact, maybe I'll take those out just to show you. If I take them out, the graphic does assume its original size, which coincidentally is the same as these two numbers. So I'm going to take that out just to show you that you don't need them. But what you do need to apply the style known as class is class equals. All right, and then you put in the name that you created for that class. You do not put the period in the name, mind you, just the name. And it does go in between quote marks. So I've got class equals quote mark, picture frame, close quote mark. And that's how we attach that particular style to this specific tag. So that's step one. Let me put the style, put the style in now. I'll actually show you the page right now. Because the style won't be applied yet because it hasn't been created, but you will see the image. So if I double click on here, there's the image. Now the style that I'm about to create will create a border around that image, and it will make it red and a certain size. All right, but there's the picture. This actually is my dog called Ranger when he was a little puppy, and this is his buddy down the street. Okay, so back to our code. And I'm going to toggle over to my CSS file. And let's create our first class style. So it's dot picture frame is what I've named it. And then I'll put in my two curly braces, opening and closing. And for a border, you do need a border style, and this is what I'm affecting today. So I'm going to use all three of these border related attributes. So border, colon, and I'm going to use pixels as my measuring unit. We will learn later on that there are a number of different units we can apply in our styles, but we're going to just stick to pixels. I end the line with a semicolon, which again is like a period at the end of a sentence. And I need border style. You can have dotted, various styles, but we need to declare this as solid. Border hyphen, just get my spelling right here, style, semicolon, solid. It's just going to be a solid line. If I don't have that in, it will not appear. And then finally, which color? I'm just going to use the common color red again. You can use a lot of different colors, which we'll get into in another lesson. So color, colon, red, close that sentence with semicolon. I'm just going to save this file. And by saving that file, when I refresh my HTML file in the browser, it should adapt, or rather adopt, the properties held within this class. And again, a class starts with a period when you're looking at the code in your CSS file. So let's just go out to the desktop. We'll launch that. And boom, voila, there we go. We have applied a class style to a specific item on the page. And again, a class style is literally stuck on in the HTML code. It's not an automatic feature like the tag selectors up here, where anytime this would encounter an H1 tag, it would decorate it as red. In this case, it's a uniquely applied style known as a class. But I can apply it as many times as I want on the page if I desire to do that. Okay, so that takes us to our next CSS type, if you will, which is known as an ID. Okay, so let me just toggle back now to my text editor again. And an ID is very much like a class, except, and this is very important, except that it can only be applied to a single item per HTML page. Oftentimes ID is used for doing layouts, if you will. We're not going to get into that because it's a little complex as a starting point. But I will apply an ID to one of my elements on the page. So let me go back over here to my finished HTML page. And I had applied an ID to my unordered list. So let me just highlight my unordered list here. And you can see here UL, if I zoom up on this, UL ID equals. Very similar to the class that we had below here, down here, but it's ID equals. And again, you declare it with a custom name that you've applied in your style sheet. So let me show you how we can do that. I'm just going to reduce the view here again so we can see all of our code. And I'll toggle over to my style sheet and I'll apply an ID. Now, again, I'm going to go to my finished ID so I can just cheat on the properties, if you will, right here. Okay, so the first thing you might notice is the selector, if you will, the ID, is declared with a hashtag. Whereas the class is declared with a period before the name, the ID is declared with a hashtag. And then you can put in any name you can come up with. I called it my list. I probably, well, actually I won't have to copy this, but I'm going to create it the same as what I did here. I will copy my list into my HTML to save some time, but for now, let's just, maybe we'll put in the list first. I'm just going to go over to my HTML page. I'm going to copy the list, and I'm going to talk about these span tags in here as well momentarily, but I'm going to start by copying that list, going over to my HTML file right here. Again, make sure I'm inside the body tags. Now the list was before the picture, so I'm going to put it in here and put that there. All right, let me just open this up a bit more if I can. All right, there, just to clean things up. So again, you declare your list UL tags, and then you have your sub tags, the line tags. So the opening line tag, /li for closing line tag, and everything in between appears on a unique single line. I do want you to copy the text exactly as I've written it here. It's meant to help you in the learning because it supports what we're creating right now. So each line is its own line separated by the groups of li tags, if you will, like this, like this. All right, so let me talk about this span. The span is kind of, well, the span allows me to select a certain group of elements within a line. So let me just talk about the span tag to begin with. Again, I'm surrounding this word tag with an opening span tag. Now the opening tag does have an attribute, as you can see, called style, and then the closing span tag. So this here, style equals, again, it's another property that you can apply. Style equals, quote marks, color, colon, red. Again, there's so many different styles we can apply, but I just thought I'd use the color as a simple, easy one to explain the concept. So in my opening span tag, I have added an attribute called style, and within that, the property value, the property is and its value are contained within the quote marks. The property is color, and the value is red. Okay, and I've done that on the next two lines as well for this relevant word. And I'm only isolating one word, but it could be a group of words. Absolutely. Okay. And here we go. That's the third span. And again, if I go over to, actually, well, we'll launch that. Let me just launch that now. Let's go to the browser and I can refresh my page. And there you can see. Now I haven't applied an external style yet, but you can see the inline style being applied with these red text elements right there. Okay, so there's my list. It's an unordered list. That's why you see it as bullet points. UL. An ordered list would be OL, and an ordered list would give me numbers at the beginning here. Okay, so let's go back to our code, and we will just go into our style sheet here. So I'm going to toggle over to my style sheet here and create the ID. So it's hashtag, again, my list. I do need to match what's in my HTML if I've already placed it. Regardless, it does need to match. And opening curly brace and closing curly brace, and in between here I will be putting the unique properties. So the first one will be color, colon. I put a space in there. I'm 99.9% sure I don't need a space, but I put it in. That's how I roll. Anyhow, color blue. Let me put the font size. Now again, with font sizes, there are lots of different ways of establishing the size. I'm going to use the common word called large. Font hyphen style, or rather size, size, colon, large, semicolon. Okay, and then the last one is to create space in between the lines. You saw that they were fairly tight together. I actually want to give them lots of breathing space. It's called line height. Line height. Make sure I spell that correctly, or it will not work. 35, and I'm going to use pixels as my unit of measurement and close that line with a semicolon. Save my file. And now that that's saved, and that these files are actually where they belong the whole time. So every time I make a change and I refresh my browser, I should see the updated change. I'm going to go over to my browser now, and I'll hit refresh. And ta-da, there we have it, an ID attached to a specific tag, in this case the UL tag, the unordered list tag. And you can see the elements have changed. I have changed it to blue. I've created a lot of space in between, and the size has been dictated accordingly. All right, so I've got 3 samples on this demo. I'm not going to do the whole thing for you. I will explain the rest though very quickly through the code view. But for now, I have one tag selector, which is dictating the style for that H1 tag. Then I have an ID attached to the list, which is what makes it blue and dictates the size and the space in between the lines. Separate from the style sheet, I have inline styles created attached to my span tags. And again, I have a class style applied to my photograph here, to my image, dictating the border size and the border color and so on. Now I'm just going to go and get that code once again. Page source. And you can see here, I'm just going to reduce the view of that a bit. And you can see what I have so far. Now again, it does look a little nicer here because it's color coded. Okay, so let me just take you back to my text editor and go over the finished file. So here are my paragraphs that I want you to replicate as well. You can see them surrounded by paragraph tags. The second paragraph, let me just highlight here, does have a line break, a BR tag right here after that period, and that's what returns this line but doesn't create the big space that you see on paragraphs. And that is contained, that again is in line, meaning it's contained within the element of the paragraph. Then I have my unordered list, and my ordered list has the ID reference right there, and then my list lines, and then my closing list tag. Now the H2 tag is very simple, just H2, and you will create a style for the H2 tag. My image, which we've done, right there in between paragraph tags, and the image opening tag does have a class reference within it. Then I simply have this paragraph which is sitting below the image inside of p tags, and I also have my hypertext link. Now the hypertext link, I'm going to show you in the code view how it has styles for what we call different states. In other words, when the mouse is not over the link, what does it look like? Versus when the mouse is over the link, what does it look like? And I've added a third one, what does it look like when we've clicked the link once, which is known as visited. So I am going to cheat here a bit and toggle over to my finished CSS file here and talk around the links. The A is the reference to links in general. And again, this is a tag selector with a specified property. So this one is referring to the link in its normal state, and in between the curly braces you can see I've applied a color property with a value of red. Hover is when we mouse over it, so A : hover, and then inside of the tag, inside of the curly brackets, again I'm declaring the property color and the value blue, ending it with a semicolon. And then the third one, I've actually made it the same. You can make it different. Maybe I'll make it different here. I'll call it purple, which again I happen to know is one of the accepted colors. And A visited, A : visited, and inside of the curly braces we apply color to that. So let me copy that over to my style sheet, my other style sheet. I'm just trying to be quick here. All right, save that, and then I'll also copy the link from my HTML file, which was previously created. So I'm cheating here a bit. I'm copying that, and I'm going to go to my current HTML file right here and add that to the bottom of the page. So there's the link. I'm going to save that. And in fact, I can now go out to the browser. I'm just going to close that page source and update this, refresh. And if I scroll down a bit here, you can see there's the link right there. Now I have been clicking on it, that's why it's purple. The first time you do it though, you should be able to see the different colors. And if you know how to clear cache in your browser, that's another way to see the colors re-render themselves. So unfortunately, I can't show it here right now. So let me go back to my code view. And I'll actually go to the finished code and show you one more thing that's important, which was I actually attached a style to the body. This is a way, I guess, if you want to have some default styles on your whole page. And this is mostly to do with the text. So if I go to my text on my finished page, actually I'll go out to the browser here and open up the finished file. You can see here that this text has this brown color, same as here. It's brownish red, but it's known as brown. And that's because I've attached a style to the body tag. So if there is no style attached to any of the text, it will default to this color or any of the properties that happen to be in there. So let me go back over here and just explain that. So there's the body tag. It's my opening and closing curly braces. And here's my color property and value. Color, brown. I did declare a font family. We will get into the details of font families in another lesson. But the way this works basically is under font family, under values, you can see I have 3 font types here. The way it works is it looks for Helvetica first. If it can't find it, it will look for Arial. If it can't find it, it will use a system font, which happens to be sans serif. So this is choice 1, choice 2, and backup choice 3 if all else fails. So that's the font family declaration. So it's font-family, semicolon, and then the font size, font/size, 14 pixels. So that is my default. Now if I was to change this to 18 just to demonstrate this and save it, if I go back out to my browser and refresh, all of this brown text should get bigger, and there you can see that it has gotten bigger. Okay, so that's just like having a default for my page. I attached it to the body tag as you see here. So I do want you to do all of these exactly as you see them here. Body tag, H1, create one for the H2 tag, which declares it as green. I want you to create a class style, which starts with a dot, attach it to the picture frame. I want you to do it exactly as demonstrated here. I actually don't mind if you change a color or something, but I want you to use the same properties. Your values can vary, I guess, but border style is a must. Border style solid is a must. The ID called my list, which starts with the hashtag, and then the 3 link states, a link, a hover, and a visited. And within the HTML file, you can see here, I can leave this here so that you can actually pause your screen if you like, and literally copy this for the sake of this exercise. Okay, so there's all the HTML. There's all the CSS. And let me go out to the directory structure. It should be inside of a root folder, through HTML file, and an images folder with the image inside of there, and a CSS folder with the CSS file inside of there. So that is your introduction to HTML and external style sheets. And I'd like you to create this, then compress your root folder and upload that to Blackboard. And let me just go back to my finished product here. There we go. And you know what? I'm going to change that brown style quickly back to 14. Just change it, save it, go refresh my browser, and there you have it. Okay, so I want you to create this, reproduce this, and then upload that finished zipped folder to Blackboard. And that is your lesson on HTML and external CSS style sheets.